All right, welcome back to the 440 Chrysler 505 stroker build. 2 weeks ago I picked up the block and brought it back. The machine shop decked it, they bored it to 30 over, and they washed it. So I got the block back, I got the rods back. It looks pretty good. You know, you can really see in this video, now that everything's clean, you can really see the lifter bore bushings. And someone in a previous video had asked about the size of the oil hole in those bushings. It's kind of very hard to see it, but it's a very small hole. You know, maybe 1/8 inch, right around there, maybe a little smaller, maybe a little bigger. So that is the oiling hole that oils the lifter. Now we're going to use solid lifters, so it probably won't be a big deal. We'll get enough oil in there to lube the lifter as it moves up and down within the bore. And when it comes to Chryslers, they're not like Chevys. Right here you see that rib that comes off of the 4th cam bearing. That feeds oil up to the rockers, right through that hole right there. So you're not relying on the oil to go through the lifter, pump up the lifter, and through the push rod and lubricate the top end of the engine. So when it comes to Chrysler, this is how it's done. You know, I talked to the machine shop when they had first done it, and I said, man, them holes look really small. And he said, nope. He said, that's the way we do it all the time. He says, hydraulic, solid, everything. So, like I said, we're running a solid lifter cam, so as long as we have lubrication in there, we should be good to go. Now the block has been decked. It's been decked to a 10.705 deck height. Everything looks pretty good there. You know, this block's been used. It has some little marks in it, which won't cause a problem. The head gasket will seal that up, no problem. It doesn't go into the coolant hole or anything. So it's bored 30 over. The bores came out very nice. I don't know how well you can see that crosshatch in there, but everything's good. I ordered a set of cam bearings for this. I ordered a set of rod bearings also, and the rod bearings I had to order are 1 under, and we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to show you how to check rod bearing clearances. These are the narrow Speed Pro bearings. These are going to get sent out and get a dry film coating put on them along with the main bearings. And I also ordered a set of cam bearings for this. And in a future video, I'll show you how to put them in. This is a Durabond Performance cam bearing set. I've had good luck with Durabond over the years, and I like to use their coated bearings. This is their coated bearing. So there's a dry film lubricant on the surface of that bearing. And like I said, I've had pretty good luck with Durabond in the past, and I like to use them. I've used Seal Power, I've used Clevite cam bearings, and there's no problem with them. I mean, I've never had an issue with any of them. I just like the quality of the Durabonds. So that's what I've been using for quite a while now. So, and Durabond, you can also get them coated. So nice set of bearings. Block looks good. I had them run it through the hot tank. We got a little bit of flash surface rust going on here, but this block is going to be, I'm going to clean this with hot soapy water with some rust inhibitor mixed in with it. I took the bag off of it that it came from the machine shop with. You don't want to leave them bagged up because condensation gets in the bag and holds it up against the block, and then you end up with rust spots. So I took the bag off of it. They did a pretty good job cleaning it. I can't complain. I'm happy with the machine work. I'm happy with the bores. Everything looks pretty good. So, all right, we'll move on to checking our rod bearing clearances, because I need to get the bearings sent out. The main bearings and the rod bearings need to get sent out to get a dry film coating put on them, just like the Durabond bearings. So I need to just check my rod clearances, make sure they're where I want them to be. I checked my mains already, and we're going to get these bearings sent out and have them coated and move on from there. We'll be right back. Now, before we get into measuring our crankshaft and checking our rod bearing clearances, I wanted to just touch quick on some of the tools that I use. A lot of my quality measuring stuff is Starrett. So I bought these brand new. I've had them for probably 20 plus years. I have a 0 to 6 inch Starrett mic kit that I measure with. So here's my 0 to 1. This is my 2 to 3. I'm sorry, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. This is my 5 to 6. So the majority of these I bought new. The 5 to 6 one, if you're building engines, to be honest with you, I've never used that 5 to 6. The only reason I bought it was to complete my kit. So I wanted a 0 to 6 inch mic kit. So I bought a used one, and at the machine shop I worked at the time, they had the facilities to check it, adjust it, and certify it for measurements. So I use Starrett micrometers. These micrometers measure down to 1/10 of a thousandth. They're not cheap, you know. I think my cheapest one there, and we're talking maybe 20 years ago, maybe more, though 0 to 1 I think I paid $75 for. And my most expensive one I think I paid close to $200. Nowadays I've looked, if you buy a set of 0 to 6 Starrett micrometers just like this, you're probably going to spend close to $1,000. So those are my Starrett stuff. When you're measuring and building engines, you want to buy good measuring equipment. I mean, your engine's only as good as the equipment that you're measuring it with. You know, there is something to be said for the feel of measuring and setting things and stuff like that, but your equipment has to be accurate. So I bought the best. You know, in my opinion, Starrett is one of the best, and this is one of their higher grade micrometers. I also use a Sun-in dial bore gauge. Now my Sun-in dial bore gauge measures down to the 1/10 of a thousandth. It was brand new when I bought it. I bought it in 2000, I think, 2001 maybe, and I paid $605 for it, which is expensive for a dial bore gauge. You know, you can get decent Fowler dial bore gauges in the neighborhood of $200-300 if you want to do this. You know, if you're a backyard engine builder and this is going to be the only engine you ever build, you know, do you need this stuff? Well, it's kind of hard to say. You know, I'm not a huge fan of Central tools, although I do have some. You know, this here is a stand for a dial indicator. So, like I said, good tools. Your job is only as good as the tools that you're using, and when you're talking about building an engine and things like that. So, like I said, I need accurate measurements because a lot of the engines that I build aren't for myself. I need to know that stuff is right when it leaves the door, when it goes out the door, and I'm not going to have problems. So, like I said, I spent the money on my Starrett stuff, the Sun-in dial bore gauge, and some other equipment, you know, as we go through this build and things like that, you know, I'll get into. So, but Harbor Freight is probably not your friend when it comes to building an engine. So, all right, let's move on to checking our rods for clearance. All right, so here we are with our brand new Scat crankshaft, 4.250 stroke, 4340 steel, and it is for a big block Chrysler, but the rod journals have been ground down to big block Chevy sizes, so we can use big block Chevy connecting rods. The benefit of that is the journals are now smaller and lighter, and rod choices are now more readily available to us. We can go with different lengths. So this is the number one journal, number one, and we have our 2 to 3 micrometer. And what we want to do is we want to check it. And micrometer fits with a little bit of drag. I've already pretty much set it because it's hard to do this with holding the camera. But we have a little bit of drag on our crank. You always want to use the ratchet or the clutch, whatever some people call it, as far as the tightness of the micrometer. And what we're measuring here, the spec should be 2.200, and what we're getting out of this micrometer here, what we're getting out of our measurement rather, is 2.199, and since we measure to the 10th, we're getting 2.199, I would say 3 3/10. So now this micrometer is locked down. I used the lock, I locked it. It is set to the size of my rod journal diameter. So crank is set. Put it down here for a second. These are the connecting rods that we're using. These are 7.100 long big block Chevy connecting rods. They're made by Scat. They're H-beam rods. We bought the rods and the crankshaft at the same time. And when we bought the rods, though, we accidentally ordered the ones that had the lesser graded bolts in them. So, and the camera won't focus. So we changed the bolts and we put in the L19 ARP bolts with 79 foot-pounds of torque. And when I changed out the bolts and I torqued everything up, the rods were roughly about 0.3 of a thousandth too small. So I had them at the machine shop, and the machine shop opened them up to the proper size. They're actually a little bit big on the spec. So our crank journal is a little bit small. Our rod housing is on the big side, and when I checked bearing clearances with the standard bearings, we ended up with 0.0035 clearance, which is a little excessive. So that's why I bought the set of 1 under bearings that we're going to check and make sure that we're good before we send them out to be coated. So all right, let's move on to checking our clearances. All right, so I have my 2 to 3 mic. It is set and locked to the same size as my crankshaft rod journal diameter. And I use this to set my dial bore gauge to 0. It's hard to do this with one hand. But if you see, that needle goes to 0. And we have plus and minus on either side of the 0. I use the micrometer. So the dial bore gauge is set to the exact size of the crankshaft journal. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our connecting rod and we're going to measure it, because I have a set of standard bearings in it at the moment. All right, so what we have here is we have my connecting rod vise in my regular bench vise, and I know it's not very clean, but the parts aren't very clean either, so they all need to get, everything needs to get clean before it gets assembled. But at the moment, the connecting rods still have honing oil on them. I'm just checking clearances at the moment. I'm not super concerned about keeping everything 100% clean, but what we're going to do is we're going to check these with our dial bore gauge and see what kind of clearance we have. So I'm going to put our dial bore gauge in, and you can see we are slightly over 3.5 thousandths of oil clearance. Maybe a couple tenths, maybe 3 7/10 thousandths. Now, to me, that's too much. I don't particularly like that much clearance. This is a standard bearing, but like I said earlier, the connecting rod is finished on the larger side of the spec, and the crank is finished on the smaller side of the spec. So that is the reason why I ordered the 1-under bearings. So let me undo these bolts, get these bearings out, and I'll put the 1-unders in, and we'll see where we're at. We should be slightly over 2.5 thousandths. I'll be right back. Just a quick note here. In order to loosen and tighten these rod bolts, this is how your rod should be set in your rod vise. So you're not twisting it, like I said, and earlier you saw that I had it viced up on the small end, the pin end rather. So now we're going to vice on the big end. I'm going to loosen these bolts. We're going to take the bearings out, and then we're going to torque them in. All right, so the old bearings are out, and the new bearings, the 1-under bearings, are getting ready to go in. Now, I don't recommend mixing your parts together, and this is not going to work. But the back of the bearing is marked. If you can see that, the bearing says STD on it. That means it's a standard bearing. So I know that this bearing is one of the ones I just took out, as well as this one here. This one has the same markings on the back. These are my 2 new bearings that are going to go in, and these are the ones we're going to check. If you look at the back of these, get it to come into focus. Now, either way, they say 001 on the back of them. Oh, there it goes. So, you see the .001 US? That means that is the 1-under bearing. This is the one that I'm going to be putting in, and hopefully our clearances come up right, and we can get these sent out to be coated. Alright, so I put in my new bearings. That's the bearing in the cap. This is the bearing in the rod. The little tangs there are for placement. So that little tang right there and the one on the rod is for placement. Now those tangs both belong on the same side of the connecting rod. So when I put this together, they won't line up, but they'll both be on the same side. If they're not on the same side, that means the cap is misaligned with the rod. So you have to put your rod together put your rod together the right way. So both tangs go on one side, and then over here there's no tangs. So we'll put this together, torque it up, and we'll check it and see what we got. Alright, the wrench that we're using to torque this up is a snap-on. It is a click type torque wrench. It is not a dial type where you set the dial. It is one of the twist handle ones. It works good. I've had it for years. I've had it recalibrated a couple times. As far as I am concerned, when it comes to measuring instruments and torquing instruments, the best is what you need. You know, like I said, the Starrett mics, the Sun and Dial bore gauge, the snap-on torque wrench. This is the kind of stuff that I use to make sure that I don't have any comebacks. So let me get this set up, torque it, and we'll check it. Okay, I have my rod bolts torqued, 79 foot-pounds. Let me reposition the rod and we'll take a measurement. Alright, I've got my rod repositioned. We're ready to take a measurement with the dial bore gauge and see what we have. Alright. Oh. The dial bore gauge is showing us about 3 thousandths or so. A little bit on the loose side, but nothing I can't live with. It's better than what we had. And once the bearings get coated, that'll probably tighten it up by a couple tenths. So as far as I would say, I'd say we're good to go. These bearings are going to come out. They're going to go get coated, and once they're finished with coating, we will remeasure and see what we have. Now, I only measured one connecting rod just to see where we're at as far as our clearances are concerned. So, you know, before I send the bearings, make sure that we got better. But we tightened the clearances up by roughly about, what, 0.7 of a thousandth, 0.8 of a thousandth. We're on the big side of the spec, but I'm okay with that. So, you know, it is within spec. Everything's good. Like I was mentioning earlier about the tangs, if you look in there, you can see that the two tangs, they don't line up with each other, but they're both on the same side of that rod. So, what I'm going to do next here is I'm going to take this apart, pull those bearings out, put them back in the box, and get everything ready to be shipped out with main bearings and have these coated. Like I said, I'm hoping the coating picks up about 0.3 or so, tightens the clearance up a little bit. 0.3 thousandths isn't bad. I mean, that's what I had on the main bearings. So I'd prefer it to be a little around 2.5, like 0.0025, but that's not bad. So we're good to go. It'll live. If you want to check your main bearing clearances, it's pretty much done the same way. You take your main caps off, you install your bearings, you put your main caps back on, torque it all down, use your micrometer, set your bore gauge to the same size as the main journal of the crank, put it in with the bearings in, and see, you know, the dial bore gauge shows you exactly how much clearance you have. So, you know, as we saw, there's 0.003 oil clearance on this, which is good. So I'm happy with it. We're going to ship the parts out, we're going to get them coated, and we're going to move on from there. Stay tuned for my next video, and thanks for watching. If you like this, like and subscribe, and there'll be another video coming here shortly. Thank you.